toxins, which is really important because of all the toxins in our environment. So how to manage your system nutritionally to release toxins. So I'm going to pass over to Gemma. Thank you very much, Gemma.
Hang on a sec. How do I?
Oh,
I'm trying to share. Oh, there we go. Yeah, there we go.
Okay, I'm just, if everyone can mute, that would be. Oh, I'll mute.
Sorry. There we go. Right, excellent. Sorted the tech stuff out. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you, Karen, for the introduction. So yeah, today I'm going to talk about, I've loved this group, and I've had some brilliant talks all about you know, the other levels of healing. But as a nutritional therapist, I deal much more with the day-to-day in the body and this realm. So yeah, I think, as Karen said, supporting detoxification is super important, because it's something we're all bombarded with, all these toxins. So to start with, as I say, I'm a nutritional therapist. I'm registered with BANT and the CNHC, and my practice focuses on food reactivity and immune health. So I'm just gonna, there we go. And okay. And I run, I do one-to-one consultations for people in clinics, both at home and in Guildford, and also online now, more online, obviously. Now, that's the way everything went. I started off in science. We were just talking about that. I actually started off at Cancer Research UK doing some research, and then realised that I was much better at talking about science than actually doing it. So ended up doing sort of PR and marketing for science-based companies for a while, until my kids were born. And then life took me in a slightly different direction, because my daughter was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when she was 2, and then celiac and hypothyroidism when she was 4. So we're gluten-free, realised that she also had dairy intolerance. So this is why the sort of food reactivity bit came about, and my sort of interest in nutrition. So I retrained at the Institute of Optimum Nutrition for 3 years, and have been practicing now for a while, focusing, as I say, on those areas. So just quickly, a little disclaimer at the beginning. Today I am going to talk about nutrition and lifestyle things. I'm not really going to get involved in supplements at all, because the supplements are a tricky one. If anybody's on medications, they may interact and things like that. So by all means, you know, ask me questions at the end. Might be, you know, I'm willing to answer sort of general questions. If it's about your personal health, I'll do my best, but obviously it's a bit tricky if you're wanting info on what supplements are great and what have you, because they might affect your blood pressure or your blood sugar, and if you're on medication for that, you know, I can't really get into that. So just, and also if you do have any chronic conditions, please do talk to a healthcare professional if you're going to make any changes, if you think that might impact adversely. So why do we care? Why do we care about toxins at all? Well, we are completely bombarded by them. I think that, you know, it's a big range here. I don't really know how many, but, you know, there's between at least 25,000 different man-made chemicals. This was based in the US, but possibly up to about 84,000 different man-made chemicals in circulation. So these are things that the body's not necessarily going to recognize, and if we are ingesting them, we need to get rid of them somehow. What do these chemicals do to us? Well, huge amounts of things. I mean, this is just a selection of things that can occur. They can disrupt sort of enzyme functioning, so disrupt the functioning of all loads of processes within the body. They can damage your mitochondria, which are the sort of energy powerhouses, what's giving you energy, and so therefore can lead to fatigue. And also mitochondrial damage is now implicated in a huge number of different chronic conditions as well. They could damage DNA, so as we were discussing beforehand, potentially trigger cancers and things if that DNA is not able to be repaired very well. They can lead to inflammation, oxidative stress in the body. The process of detoxifying these chemicals actually leads to oxidative stress, and I'll talk about that later on, but that can then damage tissues and lead to inflammation, or just the presence of toxins itself can be inflammatory if your body is reacting to those. Some of them are obesogens, which basically means they can make you fat, and that's part of the reason. This is a protective mechanism actually from the body. If you think about it, your body doesn't want these toxins swimming around its system, so what it can do is store it in fatty tissue. And so from that point of view, you know, if you have got weight that's hard to lose, some of that might be because your body is protecting you from these toxins that are in your fat tissue. And it's also one of those things to bear in mind when you're eating animal fat or fish fat, that those bits are potentially where some of the toxins are stored. So they can disrupt hormones. There are specific hormones like PCBs, for example, which are endocrine disrupting hormones. They mimic estrogens and things like that. So that can, and often they're sort of more active than your native estrogen, the estrogen that you're going to be producing. So they can lead to things like, you know, those symptoms where you would have higher estrogen, so PMS, PMT, that sort of thing. What else? You know, any other things, endometriosis, all these sort of things which might have links with hormonal disruption. Not just obviously sex hormones, but other hormones as well. So, and that can be linked with the inflammation. They can damage membranes. So if you think about, you know, years ago, we hear about people with asbestosis where particulate matter, for example, has damaged the lung tissue, and that's led to cancer. And again, they can damage membranes, say, for example, in your digestive tract. And I think most people sort of in this healthcare wellness space will have heard of leaky gut or intestinal permeability, which is when then things can pass from the inside of your gut into your body, like bacterial toxins and so on. So other environmental toxins can play a role in that. So, you know, these are just a few little things that might be going on. There are obviously more. And the other thing to think about is that there are loads of these toxins which actually are really, you know, impossible for us actually to degrade, to metabolize and excrete. So we do just store them. As I said, you might be storing them in the fatty tissue. So that means, you know, not only are these toxins building up in our environment, they're building up in our bodies over our lifetime, they're building up over generations because we're passing them on through sort of the umbilical cord to our offspring. And also think about sort of they're building up through the food chain as well. So if you were thinking about fish, for example, teeny little fish are going to have fewer toxins in than the bigger fish that have eaten all those teeny fish with all their toxic body burden. So, you know, similarly, the more things we're eating with a toxic burden, the bigger our toxic burden gets. So, you know, it's all happy days, really. Anyway, what are we going to cover today? So I've drawn this little graphic because I really love it. It's actually my framework for immune harmony that I pulled together a year or so ago. And it just covers the different pillars that I tend to think about when I'm thinking about somebody who's coming to me with a chronic health condition, which are connect, digest, nourish, balance, and calm. And actually we can, you know, use that for pretty much any topic in this area. So in this case, we can connect, we can think about what are our sources of toxicity, where are we getting our toxins from, and how is our body actually reacting to those toxins. We can think about calming our system down, so removing ourselves from the sources of toxins where possible, and also toxic environments potentially, which are going to affect us in different ways. What I mean here, you know, toxic relationships and that sort of thing, obviously also harm us, not in quite the same way, but still. And thinking about digesting. So here, this is more to do with making sure our pathways of elimination are open. Are we able to get rid of these toxins as much as we might? So, for example, Are we have we got regular bowel movements, and thinking about bile secretion as well, because that's where a lot of toxins from the liver are excreted. And then thinking about balance. So here, when we look at the process of detoxification, I'll go into that later. So this is in the liver. You've got two phases, phase 1 and phase 2. These two need to be balanced, otherwise you can actually end up with more problems if your phase 1 is working too quicker than your phase 2. And also thinking about the level of oxidative stress that's coming from the detoxification process, and also from these toxins, and balancing that with antioxidants and things in the diet. And then lastly, obviously, I am a nutritional therapist. I really need to talk about food. So what can we eat to support detoxification? Right, so how do you know? How do you know, are these toxins affecting me? I mean, when I am speaking to somebody who's coming to me in clinic, the first appointment really is just to get their history. And we tend to talk through that right from the very beginning of their lives, or even, you know, what was happening to their mother when they were in utero, and then all the way through to now. And then from that history, I can pick up whether things may be a big issue. Now, obviously, we are all exposed to toxins chronically, but for some people, there might be more of an issue. So if you think people who work, say, as a hairdresser, and they may be exposed to hair dye all the time, or someone as a gardener and exposed to pesticides, or someone, you know, as a painter, or, you know, you may have an increased exposure from your occupation, for example. Or do people have one moment in their life, or a few moments, where they've had big exposure to something? So this could be, as a student, you lived in a mouldy basement, or I had one client, for example, who had worked in an airport and opened the window and managed to get a face full of antifreeze from an aeroplane antifreeze. So, you know, something like that. And, you know, lots of things lots of health issues then stem from that particular exposure. But bear in mind, we are all exposed to all these chemicals all the time. The other thing is thinking about, so someone might say they've got Gilbert syndrome, which you would know about, say, if you'd had a blood test and your bilirubin had come back high repeatedly. But what that means is that you've got an enzyme involved in that detoxification process, that phase 2 detoxification, that isn't working so well. So in terms of Gilbert syndrome, it's enzyme involved in glucuronidation. But again, you might have done your 23andMe profile, or put it through, which is like looking at your DNA to look at your genetic variants, and you might know you've got various variants on those detoxification enzymes, which mean that you're really just not as capable of detoxifying as somebody who hadn't got those those particular variants, although they can be supported to help mitigate the variants. So in my practice, as I say, I speak a lot to people with food reactivity. And again, so people who come to me, say, with histamine intolerance, really struggling with high histamine foods, might consider that they might have an issue there with detoxification, because it may well be that, yes, their load of histamine might be high because they've got inflammation, but it might well be that they're actually not able to detoxify that so well. And the same with salicylates and things like that. That can be because they're not able to detoxify them, and they might need their liver supporting. Again, if you've got chemical reaction to lots of chemicals, it may well be that your liver burden is high as well. And again, with autoimmunity, sometimes toxins can be involved in that as well, because toxins can potentially modify some of our own proteins within our body, so they don't actually look the same as they should, and therefore the body then doesn't recognize it, and that can trigger autoimmunity, and it's one of the potential triggers. So other things, you know, you might have respiratory issues like we've talked about. With particulate matter, you might be going to the toilet a lot. That can obviously be a sign of other things, but, you know, it might be your body trying to clear your system. You might have gut issues, and we'll talk about that, but, you know, bacterial imbalance or can be a sort of a source of toxins. And also if you have got leaky gut, intestinal permeability, those toxins might be getting into your system more. You may well have issues with your liver health, some of which could be secondary to higher toxic burden, and again, skin health, rashes, itching, that sort of thing. If you're not able to clear toxins through the normal pathways for any reason, then it may well be that your body's trying to get rid of them elsewhere, and that could lead to inflammation. I mean, to be honest, the majority, you could sort of say majority of healthcare things might have some element of toxin involvement, but just a few. So where are these toxins coming from? Strap in. I'm not going to show you them all because we'd be here all night, but 85,000 toxins later. No, so right, I love this picture because it's saying you're going to feel better soon, but trust me, if you're going to be drinking hot liquid through your plastic lid, you're not going to be feeling better anytime soon, because not only have you got your caffeine potentially in there, which unfortunately is, insofar as it needs detoxifying, it is a toxin. It's not necessarily so bad as some of the others, but it does need detoxifying. But equally, you're going to get some of these persistent organic pollutants probably from the plastic. I've got the microwave meal here. Not only if you, again, especially if you put fatty food and heat it up within the plastic, that's a real good way of leaching toxins out from the plastics into your food. And also bearing in mind processed foods, there's so many different processing aids that they can use that they don't have to declare on the packaging. It's known as generally regarded as safe. So grass is what tends to be used for these to describe these sort of processing aids. So we don't have to worry about them. But bear in mind that the majority of studies they do on these things, if they do studies, tends to be looking at individual toxins, single toxins on their own. They're not looking at them in combination with other things, which obviously is the way that we are receiving them. And what else was I going to say? Yeah, so they might be safe, they might be, but they haven't really done the studies to look at it fully. So we don't really know what's in there because they won't tell us. There's a really good book actually, well, when you say good, but called Swallow This by Julia Blythman, and that's horrific. She went to loads of conferences and found out all about food processing aids, and yeah, you won't want to eat anything ever again. Right, so then pesticides, obviously, don't just think of pesticides, but also people spraying their porches and what have you with Roundup, the weed killer and things. I'm quite pleased that this chap's wearing a mask and some gloves. Certainly my father doesn't, and I see this stuff going up into his face. Household products, got some nice hand sanitizer there with triclosan probably in. Paint, yeah, with the volatile organic compounds. Got some nice non-stick, that's also potentially problematic. Beautiful, nice, clean, tidy lounge, but unfortunately bear in mind that your new sofa and your carpet probably got flame retardant, so they might not be doing you any good. She could have been smoking, getting the cadmium and what have you from the smoke, but now it's vaping and all sorts of weird flavourings and what have you in there. As I said previously, hairdressers being exposed to hair dye, you yourself, hair dye in your personal care products. Tablets. Well, I've done this partly because some of these are pink and yellow, so you've got all your colourings and things in there. Bear in mind, loads of medication is going to go through your liver and have to be detoxified. Not saying don't have those tablets, but just bear in mind that even taking something like paracetamol is potentially, using up some of your glutathione and getting it sweeter. So, yeah, and supplements as well. I mean, I say, but there's potentially tons of fillers and things in some supplements as well. Mercury. Oh, yeah, and traffic fumes, not only the diesel, the particulate matter from the diesel, and also MTBs, that sort of thing, the phenolic compounds in petrol to help your car run smoother. Mold, as I've mentioned already, and please because I might not say it otherwise, do bear in mind that you don't really want the mold, but equally when you then go and clean up the mold, especially if you're a sensitive person, when you're cleaning up the mold, that's when it's going to start releasing its toxins, because it doesn't like being killed off. So if you are a sensitive individual, which I know quite a lot of us in these professions tend to be, just get somebody else to do it who's a bit more robust, or pay somebody who's got all the kit. Oh yeah, Wi-Fi, well, you know, it obviously doesn't get detoxified in the same way, but it is something to bear in mind. And then again, endogenous, so not only I'm thinking about bacterial toxins from maybe an overgrowth of bacteria in your gut, you also might have fungus growing, you know, candida or some fungal infection. Those are potentially producing toxins. But also think about your liver's not there just to detoxify all these chemicals that we're now exposed to. It was originally there to just detoxify all the things that you make yourself, so hormones and histamine and, you know, presumably some bacterial toxins and that sort of thing, but things that are just normal byproducts of living. And so that's part of the problem when your liver gets clogged up with all these external toxins. It's not able to detoxify our own metabolites. Anyway, it's too much. Need a drink. Ah, shoot. There's another one. Right. So first up, you know, when I think it's kind of funny that I'm talking about detoxification, because really when it comes to it, detoxification is one of the last things that I would potentially do with clients, because it is you want to make sure everything else is running smoothly. But what I'm going to talk about today is really just the basic things that you can do on a day-to-day basis, which isn't, you know, a detox, for example. It's just supporting that process. So the first thing really is looking at your environment, checking out, you know, as we've just said, there's all these potential sources of toxin. How can I reduce that load? So first up, you know, don't drink through that plastic lid, swap to maybe a stainless steel cup, something like that. You could potentially swap your caffeine for a nice liver supporting herbal tea or some water instead. But obviously, you know, it's dependent on how much you're having as well and how able you are to tolerate it. Swap your plastic container, even if you are going to get your microwave food, fair enough, you know, we all are. I'm not going to say everything has to be home cooked and spent hours over, but do take it out that plastic container before you warm it up at the very least. So put it into a bowl, a china bowl, whatever, before you heat it up. And if you are yourself storing food, if you can choose glass containers over plastic, all the better. Or at the very least, cool it down first before you put it into your plastic container, because, as I say, the heat and the plastic really don't mix. So this is an app called Think Dirty. I'm sure you've probably heard Suzanne talk about it before, but if you're thinking about household cleaning products and personal care products and makeup, that sort of thing, these things tend to be available in the Think Dirty app. So you can put in what you normally use, and it will give you a score as to how clean it is. And then you can also search for other products that might be better. So, for example, Suzanne obviously sells Tropic products and they come up really highly, but then also things like Simple products and things like that. You know, you'll see it when you're going into the supermarket. The things that are saying no parabens and no phthalates, that's really important, because those are some of the endocrine disrupting chemicals, so the hormone disrupting chemicals that can mimic estrogen. Also, have a think about, you know, obviously you can swap to these products, but have a think, do I really need them in the first place? So you can just, you know, get an e-cloth and wipe your surfaces with an e-cloth rather than spraying polish or what have you. You know, I opt for the easy maintenance routine with very little makeup because I'm quite sensitive to it. But, you know, do you need all your makeup products that you're using? Do you need to dye your hair? Can you embrace old age? You know, these are all things that are sort of put on us from society, that we are supposed to be looking a certain way. But, you know, women are women are exposed to so many more chemicals because of it than blokes. Move somewhere lovely. No, that's not this picture. Open the windows. So our internal environment actually can be quite problematic, especially now we've got hermetically sealed houses with the double glazing and what have you like that. If you've got some issue with mold, for example, it's going to be more problematic if you're not circulating the air through. So do open the windows and breathe in. Obviously, this is slightly more problematic if you're not living in this beautiful location. Your mobile phones, just can you put them onto airplane mode? Can you make sure you put them in a bag? Use the speaker. I'm sure you know this is preaching to the converted, really. Try and keep them outside the bedroom, all of that. And this is just with the EMF, also the blue light, you know, that's a whole nother matter. And actually the blue light is going to be problematic for your melatonin levels, and melatonin is a lovely antioxidant which will help mitigate some of these things. So yeah, the mobiles aren't great. So this is a slightly more costly thing. So swapping to organic veg is going to make a huge difference. Obviously, it's not necessarily possible for everybody and for all products, but so just think about the things that are which are the products that are most important. So you can use, you know, for example, use a sort of mild detergent and a vegetable scrubbing brush to scrub some of your veg. Obviously, this isn't going to work for things like soft fruits. So for them, I would say if you're going to get them, you'd be better off buying organic. They're also really heavily sprayed, things like tomatoes and berries. Green leaves as well tend to be quite heavily sprayed. So it is probably better for those if you can possibly swap. So again, if you don't live in that beautiful location, you might want to think about an air purifier. This is also something that's worth bearing in mind if you do have allergies and sort of respiratory sensitivities. Try and choose one which doesn't produce ozone. And again, you might want to think about a water filter, because again, you know, our water is going to be filled with quite a lot of stuff. And lucky for us, we're now going to get the fluorine as well. So you might not want that in your water. So the Berkey filter is quite a good one, because that does keep the mineral content of the water there, but you might want to do you know, under sink water filters, that sort of thing. Right, so clearing toxins, getting on to what do we do when they're actually in our system? Well, we need to try and get them out. I think, oh, this woman's mad, she's going to do the hokey cokey, but this is a lovely image, I think, that Dr. Jill Christus talks about. She's written a great book on mold. And so she's saying do the hokey cokey, because you've got to think about in, out, and move it all about. And you're doing that for a fair few things. So thinking about your air in and out. To slow down, I need to do the slowing down. I'm not very good at that. I've got to fit too much in. Don't do the breathing. But slow down. You can do your breathing practices every now and again throughout the day, just to help you know, clear things through your lungs. I've put the you know, there are loads of breathing practices. I'm sure you're very aware of most of these, but you know, even a simple sort of 4, 7, 8 breath, where you know, breathing in for 4, or holding for 7 or holding for 5 or whatever, and breathing out for 8, making sure that exhale is longer than your inhale, something like that, or alternate nostril breathing. I've put that here as a reminder to me that actually, you know, one thing to bear in mind is if you are breathing through your nose, this is also worth bearing in mind for respiratory illnesses and things like that. Our nose is designed to catch stuff with its hairs and its mucus. So you are much less likely to bring stuff into your body if you breathe in through your nose rather than your mouth. And obviously that's not easy for everybody, but there are techniques to help try and switch you to nasal breathing if you're not doing that. Being outdoors, breathing outdoors rather than indoors, as we've talked about. And the move it all about. Obviously, you're going to be breathing a lot more if you're doing more movement, exercise possibly, but just walking or what have you like that, that's going to get you your air moving more. Water. So I love I don't know where it's come from actually, but it was the solution. The solution to pollution is dilution. So if you are toxic, drink some water, and that will help your system, help flush it out. You are going to be getting rid of quite a lot of toxins through your kidney, so you want that kidney function to be good, and so making sure you're drinking a lot of a decent amount of water. I'm not going to put a figure to it, but you just have to clock it yourself. Is have you got a light straw coloured urine? Ultimately, that's what you're after. And don't hold on. Just, you might, especially if you have got, say, for example, with mold toxicity, people with mycotoxins do tend to go to the toilet quite a lot, and that is because your body is trying to flush that system out. So if you're holding on, you're actually, going to start irritating your bladder and things because there's toxins in that urine. So try and go to the toilet when you need to go. You can sweat the water out. So saunas or infrared saunas, for example, or just exercise. Bear in mind that for some people who have got a high toxic load, you might find that doing this, sort of going in a sauna or having a super hot bath might actually be too much. You might be mobilizing those toxins too much. So you might want to start just simply with a foot bath or something like that, but just, and just for a short while. So I'm going to say that later on as well, but don't push it. If it's making you feel worse, then that's not doing you any favors. Have a good cry. So this is your emotional detox, which seems to accompany these other detoxes. When you start detoxing everything else, sometimes your emotional detox occurs, and you have to let that happen. And again, don't hold on to it. Do the crying. Turns out that some of these tears have stress hormones and various things in there, so it is functioning for your body, actually, not just making you feel better. Right, so the food, I'm going to talk about the food in a minute, but talk about the food out. So you need to be having regular bowel movements. This is something, this is what we talk about in nutrition. Tell all about the consistency of your stools. But yeah, so make sure you're going to the toilet regularly. And regularly tends to mean at least once, maybe twice a day. And, a nice formed stool, not just little nuggets. So if that isn't the case, working on your digestive system first is critically important, because there's no point in trying to get any of these other toxins out your system if they can't make that last step. So you have to start with the end and move backwards with these things. So how are you going to manage that? Well, increasing your fiber. So I've put flax seeds here. So some flax seeds is great. You can, start with a teaspoon and work up. Make sure you're hydrating well with that, though, because otherwise your flax might rock hard and do the opposite of what you want it to do. And kiwis as well can be very beneficial if you can tolerate kiwis. So 2 kiwis a day, that can help move things through your system. Movement obviously as well helps, massaging your digestive tract. And we weren't designed to sit on the toilet as they are. We were probably designed to use French toilets, which we've all complained about, I'm sure, as children, but that is the way we're anatomically designed. So using a step stool to make you move you into the best alignment possible can help. And if these things aren't working, there might be an underlying reason why you're not able to go to the toilet that might need to be worked on. So, for example, maybe your thyroid hormones are out of whack and that needs support, because that can be a real sort of underlying cause of constipation. Or maybe you have got a bacterial imbalance, because some certain bacteria can help slow everything down because it sort of keeps them there. So just maybe looking into that a bit more. Or it could be emotional issue, or it could be a behavioural issue. For example, if you've always worked in the NHS and therefore you've never been able to go to the toilet, your body's got used to just holding in. So, for things like that and behavioural things or emotional things, maybe you can go talk to Karen about that sort of stuff and she can help work through. Right, so next, lymph. Lymph seems to be often forgotten, but again, you want to make sure that that's moving around your body. One good way of doing that is using a rebounder. I find, as somebody who probably hasn't done enough work on their pelvic floor since their kids were born, a rebounder is not so good. So for that, you might want instead to go for lymphatic drainage massage, for example, or you can do dry body brushing. And I'm reliably informed by my kids who are more up to date, you know, that there are lots of now loads of tools that you can use as well for supporting lymph and some rollers and what have you. Yeah. And glymphatics, this is maybe a new word, but this is more to do with sort of the lymph in your brain. Now we know that it's not, you know, on its own and isolated and doing its own thing. There might well be things in the brain that need to be drained, and that tends to occur while you're sleeping. So, you know, working on your sleep as well is really important. So how does the liver work? This is the actual nuts and bolts of the detoxification, really, in terms of the liver biotransformation. So you have a toxin, and these can be these might well not be water soluble, and so they need to be transformed in order to get out of the body. If they're fat soluble, it's a dog. So first of all, they are activated into these sort of intermediate metabolites, which actually might be more reactive than the original toxin. But then they go through phase 2 detoxification, which is conjugation. So something gets then added onto that reactive intermediate, and that will make it water soluble and inert and able to be excreted. So that phase 2, there are loads of different pathways: methylation, acetylation, amino acid conjugation, sulfation, glucuronidation, glutathione conjugation. They're just basically that, what they're defined as the different thing that's added on. There's all those different pathways. And then once they are water soluble, you can either sort of get them out into the bile and then out through the stool, or they go through the blood and then out, filtered through the kidney and out into the urine. Or, you know, you might sweat them out if these things aren't really working so well. That's not your primary way of getting things out. So, you know, as I said, you want to work from the end backwards. So supporting bile flow is really important. Are you actually able to make bile? Are you able to secrete the bile? Then thinking about phase 2 conjugation, and again, this is where we mentioned before, you might have genetic variants that could be playing a role. So you might need extra support if you've got certain variants that aren't working brilliantly. And then the other thing to bear in mind in terms of food and how to support this process is that phase 1 also you might end up with sort of reactive oxygen species as a byproduct, and both the intermediate metabolites and the reactive oxygen species can lead to secondary tissue damage. And this is all because of sort of that oxidative stress. So in terms of the diet, thinking about your antioxidants as well. So just to bear in mind as well, this is why I didn't say it earlier, but I've made a funny thing come down, never mind. This is why you want to have that balance here between the phase 1 and the phase 2, because if you are activating phase 1, you're going to end up with a heap of these super reactive metabolites. And if your phase 2 and if your bile flow, for example, is not working optimally, you can end up with loads of these reactive metabolites. So this is why you've got to be a little bit careful. And where I find sometimes, I think some supplements, for example, might actually inadvertently activate phase 1 and then can make people feel worse. So sometimes B vitamins, for example, they activate phase 1. So if you haven't got brilliant phase 2, that might be, in some cases, why they're not making you feel brilliant. And you also need that balance then between that oxidative stress and the antioxidants. Right, so bile supporting foods in. I've done my little picture here to think, well, how do we know if we need more bile support? How would I know? Well, the reason, one of the questions that we ask in clinic is, again, we're talking about people's poos. Have you got floating fatty stools, basically, floating fatty poos when you look down? And if so, that tends to mean that you're not digesting fats very well. And that tends to mean that you are not secreting bile, because bile is needed in the stool to emulsify fats. So if you've got floating fatty stools, or if you know you've got you've had your gallbladder out, for example, or if you've got gallstones, you know, any of these things might mean that you need support. And you know, it's not no harm in supporting it anyway. You know, maybe you always do better. So there's the two things to think about. So basically bile is released. Well, bile is made and then made in the liver and stored in the gallbladder, and then it's released as and when you have sort of food coming into your small intestine. But you can help support that release by eating bitter foods. So it's actually the bitter taste itself can help support sort of digestive secretion. So things like rocket or watercress or radicchio, any of those leaves that you maybe think, you know, you can taste they're bitter. That's what's doing the job. Ginger as well, turmeric can support it, green tea, that can also support bile release. And then in terms of making bile, you need sort of betaine and choline. So betaine comes from beetroot, phosphatidylcholine you can get from eggs, dairy and meat, and also beans and legumes if you're not eating animal proteins. And artichoke can do the both things, actually. It helps both with making bile and secreting bile. So there are also some sort of artichoke teas and things like that, I think. So that's the bile. Then going back a stage to thinking about supporting phase 2 detoxification, loads of the different detox pathways there need different amino acids, which are the building blocks of protein. So making sure that you've got enough protein in your diet is really important. So maybe thinking about eating protein with every meal. It tends to be something that we recommend anyway, because that helps keep your blood sugar balanced during the day. So protein, things like meat, fish, eggs. I've put oily fish in here because you've also got the added benefit of the omega-3 fats, which are anti-inflammatory. Beans and legumes again. So and then also plants. So protein and plants are the two things really. And specific plants in this case are sulfurous plants. So brassicas, cruciferous vegetables, that is. So I've got the picture here. So broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, sprouts, that sort of thing. And then garlic and onion, they are they've got lots of sulfur in. Now, some people might struggle with these because some of these foods can be bloating if you've got gut bacterial imbalance. So you might need to work on your gut bacterial balance first. But yeah, those things. And then also dark leafy veg. So for methylation, for example, folate is really important. Lots of B vitamins as well, but folate in particular is really important. So that you're going to get that from dark leafy greens. And then your antioxidants. So this is thinking about, your anti-inflammatory diet generally. So rainbow, all your antioxidants, all if you think of any food sort of with really bright colours, those bright colours tend to be antioxidants. So as many different colours as you can. So we would say eat 1-2 rainbows worth of fruit and veg every day. You might want to do a challenge. How many different plant foods can you eat during the week? But all of these plant foods are going to bring the antioxidants. And also I've put in here nuts and seeds as well for thinking of things like vitamin E, rich in vitamin E, which is also an antioxidant. So those are things to think about in terms of food. So I appreciate it's a bit of a whistle-stop tour through detoxification. I haven't given you a nice detox juice to try, but I think this is more, rather than thinking of detox as a, once a year event and dry January, think about these sort of ongoing things that can support it. So if you think your total toxic load is going to be your toxic exposure, and then take away your ability to biotransform, so detoxify in the liver and then excrete the toxins. So you want to be supporting each of those stages. So think about auditing your toxic exposure. Where are those toxins coming from and what could you change? Now, you don't want to necessarily be doing all of that in one go. You're never going to get to zero toxins. That's a little bit like the pipe dream of zero COVID. It's not going to happen, but just think about, what could you work on as and when things come up for renewal? Could you choose a slightly lower toxic option? So, when your pans come up, could you choose, I don't know, say a Le Creuset pan instead of another one with non-stick, for example? You want to think then about your ability to excrete toxins, so supporting all those elimination pathways, thinking about movement and dry body brushing and so on for your lymph system, thinking about hydration, thinking about getting your bowels moving with some fiber, thinking about all the different things you can do for your supporting bile, like your bitter greens. And you might want to think about doing more sweating and having Epsom salt baths, that sort of thing. And then your ability to biotransform, so supporting in particular the phase 2 pathways, so trying to nourish yourself with plants and protein. And the last thing I want to talk about just quickly is going slow. So lots of people, if they do a detox, will might feel awful because those toxins are going out your system, but just go slowly. If you're doing one of these programs and you're following faithfully through because somebody told you to follow faithfully through and you feel really dreadful, maybe you're going too quick, maybe you haven't quite supported some of the other things that needed supporting first. So you are going to do much better being that tortoise and just gradually working towards that finishing line, as opposed to saying, right, I'm going to go all out and I'm going to do all these detox things and I'm going to take all this liver supporting stuff and I'm going to give myself a headache and I'm going to be nauseous and don't do that, because in your body and not actually getting rid of them. So that's my warning. Right, so, apparently my internet connection is unstable. Thank you very much for listening. If you're interested in having a one-to-one consultation ever, I do free discovery calls, so you can get in touch with me either directly by my email or you can have a look on my website. I've got what else? I do send out a newsletter sporadically, not as often as I might. I've got some stuff on Facebook, but again, not as often as I might. But I do run a course, and I'm probably do it later in the year, sort of a 6-week course, which is on supporting immunity. One of the modules would be on detoxification. We kind of go through different things of that framework of immune harmony and work at one thing each week. But yeah. If there are any questions, I'm more than willing to take them. Otherwise, I have to unshare. Do I stop sharing?
Oh, you should be able to just.
Oh, there it is. Yeah,
done it.
Yeah, I've done it.
Thank you, Gemma. That was really good. You covered so much there.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I am aware I tend to overwhelm, and I was really trying hard, but it's such a big topic.
No, it's really good. It was really comprehensive. And methodical as well, so I think it worked really well. Thank you very much. So open to questions. Anyone got questions? Or I can ask questions, because I always ask questions. There's lots of things you said that I wrote down.
Okay.
So you talked about water quite a bit, and I know my feeling on mineral water in bottles. What would you say about
well, the problem you've got with bottled water, the problem you've got with plastic bottled water is you don't know where it's been. And so, like I've said to you before, there's the issue with heat and plastic. And so, for example, you might have a lovely bottle of water that you keep in your car, but if you've kept it in your car in a hot day, then that's not really a brilliant idea. So I would, to be honest, it's better if you, I mean, spring water, it's great, but it is just the plastic bottles, I would say.
I would agree with you on that. And personally, I think what you said about a filter is really important for anyone who can do it. Either a filter plumbed in or a Berkey.
Exactly.
Really important. now they're putting fluoride in and all that stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and you could get a whole house filter, or you can get just one under the kitchen sink or what have you. I mean, and they're different, you know, just look into it, because obviously some of them are different. And just bear in mind as well that if you do get reverse osmosis, you want to have something that's remineralizing it, because it will take the minerals out, and you do want the minerals. That's what's the beauty of the Berkey, is it's going to keep the minerals in the water.
Yeah, there is a company called Pure Water People, just plug in them because I've got one.
Okay.
So if anyone wanted one that is plumbed in from outside, they're really good. They're not cheap, but they're really good.
Yeah.
And like you say, it takes everything out, but then you have a separate little tap for your drinking water. It puts stuff back in.
Excellent. Yeah. So they're an Osmio Water as well. They're a really good company, and they've got really good customer service. I quite like them. They're happy to chat through everything. So
yeah. So I think that's important. It's interesting you said about berries, because I have certain intolerances and I can't eat strawberries unless they're organic. They make me itch like mad.
I think as well there's a bit of an issue with some of the berries in that they're strawberries they can liberate histamine, so that can be an issue. And I do think as well it probably doesn't help that some of these things are picked when they're really not ripe, and then they just ripen them artificially. I don't think that helps.
No, but like you say, berries are the ones that have the most toxins. They seem to, I don't know if they do they put the most toxins on them, or they just sort of hold on to them. I don't know.
I think they do spray them quite a lot, because I think they spray them loads.
Yeah.
I'd add blueberries to that.
Yeah,
definitely. I think
it is. So if you can get the organic soft fruit, that is a better bet, really.
Yeah, definitely.
Gemma, what about nuts? Because I've noticed, well, certainly with my younger daughter, when we do nuts, she can actually have the same issue. And I've said it's not actually the nut that's the issue. I think it's something that's it's been sprayed with.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, maybe so. I don't know whether it would help, but certainly when you look at sort of how the old-fashioned ways of dealing with food, you used to soak the nuts and then dry them out again, and to sort of reduce the phytate levels. So I don't know whether in doing that you might actually help mitigate some of the so in there, but maybe soaking them overnight and then slowly drying them in the oven, that might help. I don't know, but that there's certainly
that's really good.
I can't say for sure, but I mean you could try with the organic ones, but again nuts as well is quite a big one for if they're not stored. So you might want to store them in the fridge as well, because that's quite a big one for mold toxins to sit on the outside of. So it might not be sprayed, it might be mycotoxins.
So you'd keep them in the fridge?
Yeah, especially if your daughter's having issues with them. They're just going to last longer ultimately in the fridge.
That's interesting, because I'd never think of doing that with nuts, putting them in
No, I don't really do it with nuts, but realistically that is the best way to keep them. Yeah.
I think because there is that, I think the kids are more and more susceptible to this toxin level. And we're not far from Manchester Airport, so you are really, really conscious of the toxin burden that spews into the atmosphere.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I mean, likewise, none of us, I don't think, are particularly far from the M25 or the A3, which is similar.
Yeah, when you soak almonds overnight, completely changes their taste. It's lovely.
Well, that's the nut where she has the most issue with. I'm obviously very conscious of the berries, trying to get all organic for certainly the greens and things like that, but it's quite difficult sometimes to get organic nuts the same.
Yeah, it is quite hard
without actually having to second mortgage that.
Yeah, I know, and that's the problem, and you've got to be realistic. What was that?
Sorry, there's a website called Healthy Supplies. And it's a small business. I think it's in Sussex, and they do a lot of organic nuts, so they might help.
Oh, thank you, Maxine. That's really interesting. Because like you, Gemma, my daughter's got type 1 diabetes, so you're always
Exactly.
Not the one who has the nut issue, but it's interesting because that's what you think about their autoimmune.
Yeah, you think of all those triggers, and certainly my daughter ate loads of berry fruit. she had loads of other things, but she did eat loads of berry fruit, so that probably wasn't that helpful.
Yeah.
Do you think, Gemma, that there is an increase in childhood conditions and autoimmune? And I mean, personally, I definitely do. But as you in your profession, have you seen that?
Certainly, I think more from as well, just in clinic. I think there is. I think there is a lot more, and people being diagnosed earlier. I mean, so when my daughter was diagnosed, she was the youngest one that our GP had diagnosed. But I know of loads who are diagnosed really teeny. It never used to be quite that early. Type 1 diabetes was one of those things that normally used to think got triggered around puberty. That was sort of the main age, but there are so many more under 5s being diagnosed.
It's interesting because when you look at it, there's clusters. Amelia, she developed type 1 at puberty, but the amount of people in our area, that even at Amelia's school, there's kind of 12, 13 kids. That's a lot.
It's a lot.
And that it's environmental as well. So it's a toughie, and obviously as we become vaccinated and our ecosystems are being sabotaged by vaccination and various other things, it leaves the door open for autoimmune and our immune system to go into overdrive because it's seeing things.
I think a lot of it as well is I think the gut bacterial balance plays a huge role, and also the environment. When you think with all these things going on in the environment, the environmental bacterial balance and fungal balance and all of that sort of thing, that's all out of whack as well. So you're just not
it's all intrinsically linked, isn't it?
It is.
And what's your view, Gemma, on nuts per se? Because it used to be, didn't it? I mean, when my kids were little, which is a long time ago, they had nuts right from when they could eat them, as long as they weren't a choking hazard. But then it became this big thing about don't give kids nuts until they're 5. Do you think that's right or not?
I don't think that was the advice when I was. I don't recall that being the advice. They probably changed that again. No, I don't think so necessarily. That is always the. I mean, certainly, I think for kids who have a history of allergy in the family, that might be slightly different, but otherwise I think there is that danger of not having introduced as well, and then that causing problems later. So even if it's just introducing at a lower level, if you're all right, I mean, wouldn't necessarily go for, but I don't know what the public health advice is now, but these things seem to change all the damn time.
They change all the time. It's a bit like, going back to pregnancy, what they used to advise when I was pregnant with my kids and what they advise now. Is so different. And I'm not sure what it's based on, because some of the things they say, you think,
no,
really?
In terms of allergies and things like that, actually sort of, it's a funny old one, because when say for example someone does intolerance testing and they look at IgG, for example, sometimes those IgGs, a particular IgG4, it actually is kind of protective against allergy, and so your exposure to a food antigen can stimulate that IgG4 and then protect you against the allergy. So it is it's a tricky balance, but I think the advice is different if you've got obviously severe allergies in your family. I think you'd be a bit more wary.
I mean, there's a difference obviously between an allergy and intolerance, but
But also, there is this issue as well, potentially, that some of these food things, some of these chemicals that we're adding to food can change that food protein. So there's this whole sort of thing. I think Stephanie her name, has talked a lot about glyphosate, and there's issues potentially with glyphosate making us more susceptible to non-celiac gluten reactivity or celiac disease, for example, again, colorings and things like that, people are reacting to those sort of things. And if they're reacting to those in conjunction when other food proteins are present, especially when, you've got leaky gut, that sort of thing, then I think you just, I don't know, opening the floodgates to.
I just noticed it's changed so much. If I look at my parents and their era, they're in the 80s, basically no such thing pretty much as an allergy or an intolerance. Nobody really had that then, and they all ate, like, everyone grew their vegetables in the garden, obviously not as much traffic or any, the toxins are so much higher now that you can't help but draw that conclusion, can you, that that's got a massive part to play.
I do think it has a big part to play, but you think about the lifestyle generally, so many things have changed, in terms of us being outside, in terms of us being in the mud, in terms of the environment, as I say, exposure to microbes and what have you in the environment. All of that is
I think I'm a bit worried about everyone putting this anti-bac on their hands.
Don't get me started. I'm always saying this is my kid. Luckily, Caroline, maybe you've got the same thing as we were able to say for my little one. She can't possibly use antibac because she can't then get a proper glucose reading. So we were able to get her just to wash her hands. But the triclosan in there is really not great, and the fact that you need your microbes on your skin. They're doing a job for you. They're actually stopping other microbes. That's what the microbes do. They take up space so that you don't get infected with other things. So it always strikes me as peculiar that you would just kill them all off so that then you're just like a blank slate for anything coming along. It's not mine.
Don't you think it's a little bit of an obsession with bacteria and now viruses, obviously, but before it was all bacteria, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I do. But I do. I think it is this whole thing. I've done an article on that actually. I think that some of the guys you've seen it, but talking about that terrain versus the germ versus the terrain, and actually, your terrain's got a really big role to play, not just the germ.
Yeah, sure.
Is there any particular foods in Ireland and the UK that one needs to be extra cautious of? This is what I mean. I lived in Spain, and they have a very, very high, they use an awful lot more antibiotics, etc., meat than they do here. Mm-hmm. And the amount of people, actually Ireland had, I don't know if the stats are still, we had one of the lowest rates. So for that reason, I would obviously try, when possible, get Irish meat because I felt it safer. Now, is there any particular foods that are processed or used that are a higher risk for us in this part of the world?
Well, I mean, we were obviously under the European rules, and they were supposed to be a lot better than, say, in the States and things like that. There is a list. I'll try and find it. There's a sort of dirty dozen list that they put out for the UK of some of the things that are worse in terms of being sprayed, in terms of fruit and veg. As I say, I think soft fruits, I think tomatoes, it changes regularly. But soft fruits and tomatoes, and I think spinach, like bagged salads, that sort of thing. But I can't think particularly. I mean, what worries me slightly is with the wheat. Obviously, we're wheat free here, but with some of those grains, is that they've started. They use glyphosate. They started to use, and I think they do it in this country, but I'm not 100% sure. But they started to use it as a desiccant, so like to dry this stuff out. So they harvest it in, and then they still spray it with more glyphosate to dry it out. So that would be something that I'd be slightly concerned about. Some of those grains, really.
Because
organic grains.
My experience was on the other side of the coin, where Spain I felt was healthier, is when we used Get Veg, it would go off. because we were getting veg from local farmers and things like that. And of course, they weren't spraying it the same. So it would decay as the way nature meant it to decay.
Yeah.
Where if I wasn't using supermarkets and all to the same extent. And obviously supermarket veg is a different story.
Yeah, I mean, it is. It's just brought in from so far, some of it and picked, you know, unripe and ripened up, ripened up off the vine and all sorts like that. Yeah, I agree. I think, you know, somewhere like France, they've got, you know, you're buying the veg fresher and it seems more local and all of that sort of thing, whereas over here stuff is older. Yes, well, but yeah, I'm not sure from the toxic load. But certainly I do worry about some of the things that aren't, you know, that obviously we're selling here, but buying from places where there isn't necessarily as much regulation. So, you know, what do you call it? Sugar snap peas from Senegal or whatever.
Yeah.
I do worry a bit about that.
Yeah. No, thanks, Gemma.
Interesting. I'll have a look. I'll see if I can find. I'll make a note, Rosemary, and see if I can find the list of the. Well, I know because the US has a Dirty Dozen, and I can't remember if it's exactly called that, but I think it's, you know, there's a European sort of working group, so I'll send that to you.
Yeah, like my brother who lives in America, and we don't necessarily keep our eggs in the fridge, but they have to keep their eggs in the fridge because what the Americans do is they actually clean the eggs and they taking away the natural bacteria that helps them. Yeah,
I know. And there's all their chlorinated chicken, which I was hoping we weren't going to import, but we might now. But, yeah.
And when he originally emigrated, he couldn't understand why all the Americans have the eggs in the fridge.
Yeah.
That was the reason.
Yeah.
Just to say for anyone who wasn't online when I said it before, but Suzanne's not here tonight. She apologises, but something came up. So she kindly let us in. That's why her beautiful Pegasus is there. Just so you know, she'll be along to the next one. Okay, any more questions for Gemma?
Thank you again for inviting me, and thank you.
Thank you, Gemma.
That's great.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Very informative, very helpful, very thought-provoking. We're going to go away and change things.
Remembering green tea now.
Oh, I was going to say about green tea. I have a bit of a funny thing with caffeine and green tea. Not to put too fine a point on it, turns me out basically. So yeah, I can't touch it, even though I sort of like the feeling that I feel like it's cleaning me, but I just can't tolerate it.
Yeah. You have to trust yourself. That's the thing, you know, with all these things. Like I said to you, you don't follow what somebody said, you know, it's such a bugbear of mine. I'm sure you wouldn't. But, you know, if I've said, oh, you have to do this to support this and you have it and it makes you feel sick, please don't do it. Just like, clearly don't, you know, it's not for you. There are other options.
No, unfortunately.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Brilliant.
Really appreciate it. And we'll be back in a couple of weeks. I'm not sure yet what we've got in a couple of weeks, so we'll let you know. It'll be a surprise. So thank you, ladies, for all coming along.
Thank you very much, Karen.
Take care.
Bye.
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 Take care.
Stop recording.
Yeah, so I've stopped recording.